if I give a speech, it wouldn't be a speech if I wouldn't have my traditional little sheets. So I will have them also today. I would like to first thank you all for your presence, for my farewell reception. But like everything in Parliament, it exists in three. So in Brussels, in Strasbourg, and in Luxembourg. And in case this one should not be sufficiently good, we have two more chances, Roberta, in Luxembourg and in Strasbourg. And if we are still disappointed, 27 offices in member states, New York, Washington, you know, we can go a little bit further. But I'm quite confident that we can reach our targets inside the European Union. So normally these days I'm always asked 5 questions. So maybe I should answer them here. Like this, they're all answered for everybody. So the questions I'm getting is, first, how is it to be a Secretary-General of the European Parliament? Secondly, what are the things you are most proud of? Third, what have been the most difficult decisions? 4, how do you feel? And 5, what will you do next? So if I answer all these questions, I think it has been useful coming to this event, no? So the first, what is the role of the Secretary-General? In fact, it is many roles. The first, and there I'm with the German sociologist Max Weber, who founded, in fact, this. He said, who are politicians? Members of Parliament, journalists, there we all agree, and also the political administration. So in that sense, I can confirm you have to understand politics to be able to do this job. But I've always perceived as my main responsibility to try to make this organization future-proof. It is easier to preserve the consensus of the day, but the real responsibility is to prepare the organization for what is coming up in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years. And there the Bureau has been playing a key role. Whether you want it or not, you also have to be a crisis manager. I've been sitting in the Situation Room here with colleagues when there was a terrorist attack on the Malbec station, and we didn't know whether it would stop there. I've been sitting with colleagues in not so much a Situation Room in Strasbourg when we had to close everything down because there was a terrorist attack on the Christmas market and we didn't know what would follow up. And I also had the very specific challenge to manage the COVID crisis. Fourth, you have to be a psychologue, in reality with everybody. But when I look back at my 6 presidents, there were some who needed this psychologue treatment more than others. And probably it's better if I leave it to your imagination who fills this category. 5, you have to be a negotiator. Of course, with the Council, you know, when we are asking for staff, we better ask for something we are going to get, so we've been clever. But also inside the House, because I think that's a fundamental point we all have to remember. This is a House of minorities. Everybody is a minority. And even the biggest group is only the biggest minority. And that is in effect a wonderful thing, because it means you need to listen, you need to understand that also the other one has a valid point, And you need to bring everybody together. It's not just because somebody has 50% and one vote that he is always right and the others are always wrong. That's why I believe Parliament is a wonderful place, in fact. And the Secretary-General has to bring the political and the administrative world together. It's the point of connection between the two. So, what are the things I'm most proud of? When you come into my office, you will see that on the left side there is a scalp. Of course, not a real scalp. See, can calm down.
You would ban it.
Everybody in human rights, vegans, and so on immediately. Now, a newspaper article, a portrait I had in 2014 by the Financial Times, half a page, never before, never later, where they accused me to have been the devious mind behind the idea of Spitzenkandidaten. And I thought if they accused me before the election, then I also put it on the wall and I'm proud of it after the election. Of course, nothing that is ever done is done by one person. And there have been many, many people working on the Spitzenkandidaten. But I think we can say all together as an administration that we pushed that concept as one of the firsts. 1.5 years before the elections, we already said, this time it's different, choose who's in charge. When European political parties haven't even decided that they were going to have Spitzenkandidaten. And to this belongs also the rules and the financing of European political parties and foundations. If we want European democracy, we need political parties in Europe. It wasn't easy for everybody. I remember debates with GUE at the time, who said they still have this terrible experience of the Third International. I hope I'm not confused in the numbers right now. Something to do with the Bulgarian leader, and they could never imagine to create another one, but they did. So the political system in Europe was structured, and political parties are the precondition for democratic competition. And the outcome was great. 2014, we stopped for the first time since '79 the trend downwards in participation in European elections. And 2019, we turned it around, plus 8 percentage points, which means 20%. Secondly, what we call the Brussels campus, the Parliamentarium, 350,000 visitors outside COVID. The House of European History, 250,000 visitors a year. The new Info Hub, the Wirtsgarten with the concerts, and in the future, as of 2024, hopefully, the Wirtshaus, which is not to be understood in the German meaning, of course. And the Bibliothek Solvay. We have the contract as of 2013 to create a European library in the Bibliothek Solvay. Why is this important? This is important because people should not just be standing outside office buildings and inside there's an administrative or legislative process, but they should be able to perceive Europe from a historical perspective, from a cultural perspective, in fact, from all the different dimensions. And that's what the European Parliament is allowing, and the European Parliament has become the third tourist attraction in Brussels in the meantime. Something I especially like is the European Youth Event, where every 2 years we bring together 10,000 young people. Of course, I started politically as a youth activist, so I still feel as a youth activist. Don't protest now. And I used to go to Katholikentag, to Kirchentag in Germany, and it was just fantastic, 10,000 of young people discussing. So a little bit smaller, we allow the same thing, and then they come to the committees with their own ideas. Lisbon Treaty 2009, new rights for Parliament, equal lawmaker, but it's all on paper if we don't have resources. So that's why we created the European Parliamentary Research Service under the very skilled leadership of Anthony Teasdale, and sometimes we doubled and we tripled committee staff like in agriculture, in fishery, or international trade. And also modern management. with the strategic execution framework, trying to become a project-based organization, which simply means that you have to anticipate the future on a permanent basis. So when things are happening, you have already thought through and you can act. And of course, I should never forget Bazoches, the House of Jean Monnet, which we have wonderfully developed and which is so important because that's where Jean Monnet was sitting down with his closest colleagues and they drafted what became the Schuman Declaration. And from this we can also learn that it needs the courage of politicians to take ideas on board, like Schuman, who made it his own plan. But it also needs proper preparation by people like us so that it can actually happen. What were the most difficult decisions? Of course, there's always competition in this category. But I should say the most difficult situation was definitely COVID. From one day to the other, a parliament which comes together has to function when members sitting under their roof, just with a computer. They can't travel, they are not allowed. You are informed that you don't have enough firemen anymore in Luxembourg to open all the buildings. The danger is that your IT experts are going to get ill and you can't run data center, you cannot run the basic operations, so basically you're out of business. And also you risk the lives of our own colleagues. So we were able, all of us together, to guarantee that Parliament never stopped for a second to function and to legislate. That all our colleagues were kept safe. And we also showed practical solidarity. We were preparing day for day 2,000 meals for people who were in need because other canteens were closed. Our drivers were ready to drive at night, doctors and nurses to the hospital, which is not in their contract, it's not in their statute, which shows that we are not bureaucrats, but we are civil servants. So we have been hosting 200 vulnerable women. I would also like still to thank the colleagues from EPAS that they were ready to empty their offices and give them a home for a couple of months so that they could be safe. So we've been given an example that we are not just thinking about ourselves, but we are also thinking about the communities we are living in. And I cannot speak about this with also saying a word on David Sassoli, who was an outstanding president in this situation, because he was at any moment ready to take his responsibility, popular or not. And that's not always widespread in the political world. We had to take decisions, the two of us, in the very first days and weeks, which were then authorized by the Bureau. But I cannot be grateful enough for the trust I've enjoyed by David Sassoli. So, how do I feel? Any guess? First, I feel grateful for having been allowed to fill this responsibility for such a long time, 14 years. And it's really an exceptional experience. Secondly, I'm content because I believe that those 14 years altogether were successful years for the European Parliament and that we have advanced and we are now in a better place. Thirdly, I must say I also feel relieved because it's not guaranteed that you can leave such a function in one piece, physically and psychologically. At latest count, it was still the case. Some of you might have a different opinion, but I feel relieved. But I also feel sad because many colleagues, but also members, who you see on a daily basis, I will see much less often. And those colleagues and members have also become friends. So, what will I do next? Next, of course, I will continue my speech. But after this, as of 1st of January, I started my engagement in voluntary work, and I was lucky enough to make a profession out of this. So I intend to go back to voluntary engagement. I have counted the responsibility of Secretary-General is my 8th reincarnation. Yeah? I'm a Catholic, of course, so I shouldn't speak of reincarnations, but others anyhow have assumed we are globalists, so we can use these kind of expressions. I started off 9 years in the national board of Jung Union Germany, which is a CDU youth organization. I was head of foreign and European affairs in CDU central office. I was chairman on the European level of Christian Democrat Youth. I was Secretary-General of the EPP party, Secretary-General of the EPP group, General Director for Legislative Affairs, DG IPOL, Head of Cabinet of the President, and now Secretary-General. So in my 9th reincarnation, I would like to work on concepts for Europe. So you see, nothing really changes. I've been accepted last year as a visiting professor at the Catholic University of Leuven. I've been accepted this week as a professor in practice at the London School of Economics. I've agreed to do 6 talks a year at École Nationale Supérieure in Paris. And I also intend to do a week in the spring and a week in the autumn at the Colin Powell School for Global Leadership in New York. Additionally, I remain closely engaged with the Adenauer Foundation, which I've been for nearly 40 years, and also with the Martin Center. In the United States, there is a tradition that people who had active positions, they remain afterwards available for discussion, for thought, for thinking, for debate, for reflection. And I've always admired these people. I had the privilege to meet recently again Henry Kissinger. He's 99 and he's still active. Okay, he was a little bit jet-lagged, but he just came back from Japan, Not so bad. Brzezinski, Madeleine Albright. I happily admit I'm not in that league. But nevertheless, it can serve as an example, and I think we would profit in Europe if more people would be available for similar roles as well. When you've been in my office, you have maybe seen that behind my desk there are 2 photos, and there is a third one which is still standing but doesn't have a nail. The one which never got a nail was a photo with President Macron, but there's still some time. The ones who got a nail and who are on the wall for 13 years are photos with a social Christian Democrat, father of Europe, called Helmut Kohl, and a Christian social democrat, father of Europe, who is Jacques Delors, who visited our Bureau away days many, many years ago. So they have always been serving me as an example, and especially as an example that it's not sufficient to focus on the latest opinion polls. It's much more important to have a historical vision, to know where you're going. It's important to take risk, but that's how important things are being created. Parliament had always this engagement and this vision over many years. And in fact, we are always standing on the shoulders of many others. As Secretary-General, Harald Römer, Julian Priestley, Enrico Vinci, everybody built on this house. So, to finish, in case you should already have been gotten a bit worried, or in case the glass is already warming up, I would like to thank all colleagues, because I surely don't underestimate the role of Secretary-General, but it's always a common and collective effort. It's always everybody in his or in her position which is helping that the Parliament is successful and continues to advance. I cannot finish this without thanking my own cabinets. We have a cabinet. We also have a cabinet in exile, which is meeting always in the summer close to Strasbourg. But especially maybe, and let's say for all of the cabinet members, my three heads of cabinets, Freddy Drexler, who served at the very beginning, but also as my advisor as General Director, Christian Mangold, who was courageous during 6 years as head of cabinet and then needed to get out into communication, and Susanne Altenberg, who has always complimented me in a wonderful way. I would also like to ask you to support my successor, Alessandro, the way you have supported me. Up to now there was German leadership, now there will be Italian leadership, but from northern Italy. And there's a lot of Habsburg over there. So, enjoy it, continue to engage, and make the Parliament even a better place. Thank you.
Thank you.